Stephen RAICHLEN. Well, I am really excited about this. I'm really happy to meet you. Stephen RAICHLEN, I don't know why I do these introductions, because I assume the people who are interested in watching or listening to this podcast, this particular episode, know what they're in for. Stephen RAICHLEN is the grandmaster of all things cooked on grills, barbecues, and smokers. He's the author of 31 books, writer for all the fancy publications like Bon Appetit, Food and Wine, Esquire, and many others. Creator and host of more TV shows about smoking and grilling that even seems possible. I don't know how you know where you're going from one day to the next. And you are the one person I would never invite to my home for barbecued ribs or a nice tri-tip because of the intimidation factor. I imagine, do you get invited out to people's homes for a little meal?
Not as often as I wish I would.
That's what I'm thinking. I have a friend whose husband is a restaurateur, and he's quite well known in his city. And I asked her that once. I said, "Do you guys ever get invited to other people's homes for dinner?" She said, "Now that you mention it, no, not really."
Yeah, and the intimidation factor, it's really quite silly because I'm a very gracious host and I'm very appreciative. And you know what? Most people are great cooks. You know, at least when they have company, they can bring out one dish, the one dish they shine in. So,
Yeah.
you know, but at any rate,
I don't know why we always feel that we have to impress, if nobody else than ourselves, in terms of our ability to produce something that's just right. My wife is always telling me that I'm too critical of my own cooking, and I do most of the cooking in our home because I work very early in the morning and she works until about 6 o'clock in the evening. So I typically prepare dinner, and if I'm using the grill, using the smoker or something, I'm always like, these ribs are a little dry. I didn't get the right ones, or I think there's something wrong with the wind that was blowing today or something like that. She says, it tastes like the last group that you did. So I don't know, maybe we're a little too critical of ourselves. So as I was stalking you on the internet to prepare for the conversation, although I do have several of your books, I was surprised to learn that you were really apparently more interested in writing about food to begin with and doing TV about food rather than becoming a chef or the grand poobah of barbecue. Is that right?
oh yeah, absolutely. Writer is what's on my passport as my occupation, and that's how I think of myself. And you know, if I might have a day where I'm doing TV and I'm doing interviews or public speaking, but if I haven't written something, I don't feel like I've done an honest day's work.
How did that come about for you? Where did you get your interest in doing food in particular?
Well, you know, I have a degree in French literature, and I guess I took a wrong turn, but I've always been a food writer. I've always loved writing. I've always loved food. When I was growing up, you know, my mother was a terrible cook. She was a ballet dancer, so in some sense, was self-defense. In college, all of my jobs, you know, to earn extra money were food-related jobs. After I graduated with my degree in French literature, I won what was called a Thomas J. Watson Foundation Fellowship. Tom Watson founded IBM. These were fellowships that were created in his honor to do what we would call today soft diplomacy. Send bright young Americans around the world to study topics that they're passionate about, not necessarily academic. And I had proposed to study medieval cooking in Europe. Why medieval cooking?
Yes, why?
I wrote my thesis on a medieval French poet named Christine de Pizan, who incidentally turned out to be Europe's first feminist, but that sort of that message passed right by me, being a clueless 21-year-old. However, when I was doing my research, I came across a medieval cookbook in the library stacks at Reed College. And for some reason, it blew me away. You know, here was a book written in the language of Chaucer with letters that some of which we don't even use anymore in English. Uh, and written was really the name of the game because, prior to Gutenberg, all manuscripts, whether culinary or otherwise, were written by hand. So I'm looking at recipes that were 700 years old, and it was something about it was absolutely thrilling. And I thought, you know what, I'd like to spend a year studying medieval cooking in Europe. So I applied for this Watson Foundation Fellowship. Much to my astonishment, I got it, and that got me over to Europe for what wound up being an 18-month culinary grand tour. And I would spend my mornings in the great libraries of Paris and London, researching medieval manuscripts. Afternoons, when I was in Paris, I went to a modern French cooking school because a typical medieval recipe read something like, take this, that, and the other and combine in the customary fashion. I didn't know what customary fashion was, but I figured if I went to modern French cooking school, that would
Did you have, I'm sorry. Did you have, it's just one of my smart ass comments. Did you have ingredients like eye of newt, wart of frog, and that kind of thing?
No, but there were ingredients I was certainly not familiar with, like galangale and cubebs and almond milk. And in the Middle Ages, people roasted swans and peacocks. Great deal of medieval cooking was very much oriented around pageantry and showmanship. So they would roast a whole peacock and then stick its feathers back from it and bring it back. However, that little nursery rhyme, 4 and 20 blackbirds baked in a pan? I did actually find a recipe for how you create a giant hollow pie crust that you could then stuff with live birds. And when you served it, you open the crust and the birds would fly out. So, you got to remember, this was an age before television and social media and, movies and entertainment like that was a big, it was a big deal.
So with your passion for learning about food and its history and culture, where in your interest was the actual doing it yourself, the preparation and the reason I guess I'm asking is the reason you didn't have a burning desire to become a chef?
Yeah. Well, I love to eat. I mean, I was a restaurant critic for Boston Magazine for 10 years. So, and I, even to this day, my wife and I have running arguments. She does not like restaurants. I like restaurants. I'm always curious to see the next thing, what the next thing is. And if you love to eat, then, if you want to eat well, you need to cook. And I went to 2 French cooking schools. I have taught cooking classes in one form or the other my whole adult life. Now I do a program called Barbecue University, where people come to a luxury resort and learn how to grill and smoke from me. My shows on PBS are very much teaching shows. I'm not about cursing somebody out or voting somebody off the mountain. I really try and give useful, actionable information that can make people's culinary lives better. But in terms of working in a restaurant, running a restaurant, first of all, it would be over my wife's dead body. So the answer to that is no. And so, I think my skills are, my skill set is more verbal and explaining things. I don't know how good I would be on the line trying to get out 200 dinners on a Saturday night.
Yeah.
But that being said, I finally do have a restaurant experience that's under my belt and added to my list of credits. There's a cruise ship line called Windstar, and there's 6 small ships. When I say small, typically between 150 and 300 passengers. And on 3 of those ships, we have just finished installing restaurants that are called Star Grill by Stephen RAICHLEN. So while I do not own them or physically run them, I design the menus and train the staff and go on the ships on a regular basis to make sure the quality is being maintained.
That's excellent. That's excellent.
That may be the deepest I dip my toe into the restaurant world.
That's terrific. I can certainly understand the problem with actually having to run a kitchen.
Yeah,
is mind blowing.
Yeah, it's a lot.
So I can kind of appreciate that. Now, you said in passing I went to a couple of French cooking schools. A couple of French cooking schools. You went to Le Cordon Bleu,
I went to the
and
Cordon Bleu, and then
and
there was at the time I was in Paris. There was a new school that opened called La Varenne,
yeah,
and La Varenne was named after a famous 17th century French cook who wrote, what many people consider to be the first modern French cookbook. At any rate, La Varenne was just getting started, so I went there. I actually went there for an informational interview with the founder of the school, a woman named Anne Willen, who was writing a book about the history of cooking through its great chefs, while I was doing my medieval project. And I left my 1 hour interview actually becoming the second employee of the school. And my job was to translate. The chefs were all French. The students were primarily American and English. So I would do simultaneous translations. The chefs would explain in French. I would translate to English.
kind of a digression, I guess. What you were born in Japan, raised in Baltimore. Why did you become a Francophile? Not a
My
criticism.
no. It's a very good question. My dad took me to Paris when I was 16 years old, and it was love at first sight and first bite. I felt like I had come home, and this was a place that their attitudes toward food and their values about food were in sync with mine, and I just wanted to know more. And so I came back and went from being a middling student in French to becoming a French literature major in college.
Wow.
My dad scratched his head, how are you gonna make a living with a degree in French literature? And it did actually take many, many years for that to happen. But about 10 years ago, I started doing TV shows in French on barbecue in Quebec. And I have done, I've done a half a dozen series in Quebec, working on lining up a TV show in France right now. So, it's this funny, life goes full circle. But French has always been, it's always been a big part of my life. All of my leisurely reading is done in French. I belong to a French monthly French book club. And like I say, doing these TV shows in French, that was really it's a fun project. I'm actually more comfortable in the air in French than I am in English.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Listen, I love French cooking, love it. But I'm one of those, when I look at the menu, I have to point at an item, say to the waiter. I'm sorry, I had a distraction outside. I want this because I don't know how to pronounce it. But besides that, all of the sauces and the garlic and all that stuff is so wonderful. And here I am in Dallas, which nobody travels to Dallas for French cooking or seafood. Nevertheless, I thought it was very interesting. And you met and became friends with Julia Child when you were in France, right? And didn't she give you maybe a primary piece of advice that led to your success?
Well, she did, absolutely. She said, pick a topic that a lot of people will be interested in, but take an approach that you and only you can do.
Yeah.
And so for me, ultimately, it took me 20 years to get around to barbecue. I like to joke that barbecue found me. But my approach to barbecue, first of all, it was this Planet Barbecue, this global grilling. And I've circumnavigated the globe 4 times to study and research barbecue. My books like Barbecue Bible and Planet Barbecue obviously are about global grilling. But whenever I write any book, the first thing I do is I pack a suitcase and travel. So I think that was, and the other thing is, I guess, I've been called the intellectual of barbecue or the intellectual of the grill, but I'm very interested in the history and culture behind barbecue, behind food in general. So I think with barbecue, when I finally came to barbecue, I met Julia's 2 requirements for success. And one of those, again, pick a topic that is a lot of people would be interested in, but take an approach that you and only you can do.
And you put yourself on the top of that particular specialty. What you were just talking about is one of the great things that I love about your books, because while you typically, depending on the particular book and its intent, but you typically include lots of recipes, but it's not a recipe book. It's a book about the culture. It's a book about the history of foods and how they're prepared differently in different regions of the country and in different countries in the world, as you were just saying. It makes for fascinating reading. You can read it in bed as well as you can read it in the backyard while you're trying to do something.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. You know, I always say that people buy my books for the recipes, but I write them for the prose.
There you go. All right, let's talk a little bit about barbecue.
Mhm.
I came here to Dallas, Texas with my wife about 12 years ago. And we came from Southern California, before that Northern California. Well, and that's where I started getting kind of serious about cooking on a grill or smoking meats. And then I got here, bought some equipment, said, all right, I'm in Texas now, I'm going to smoke some. And the problem is there's great barbecue just down the street, every street. You know, so I don't have to get too ambitious in the backyard myself. But I've learned a lot. And one of the things that I've learned is that the craft of barbecuing meats has become immersed in legend and lore, and it seems mysterious and a little bit intimidating for backyard pit bosses. What advice do you have for people who are just trying to graduate from hot dogs on the Weber to great steaks and ribs and chicken and fish and stuff like that?
Well, my first piece of advice would be to buy a couple of books, and one of them is the Barbecue Bible.
Yeah, absolutely.
And another is Project Smoke, which is my book about smoking and barbecuing. A third one that is really good would be Project Fire. My next piece of advice would be to go to barbecuebible.com, my website, and sign up for my Up and Smoke newsletter, because that comes out twice a week, and that's just full of information and recipes and trends and gear reviews, and you name it, we do it. Third piece of advice, would be to, if you don't already, to watch shows like Project Fire or Project Smoke. Those are on PBS. You can also watch them at StephenRaichlen.com. But finally, just do it. Just get out, light your grill, realize that there's virtually no food on the planet that can't be grilled in some form or another. And I also include ice cream in that
ice cream
list. Yeah, because in Project Smoke, I came up with a way to smoke ice cream, and smoked ice cream is absolutely astonishing. You smoke vanilla ice cream and it kind of gives you the flavor of a toasted marshmallow. It's really, really something.
Wouldn't surprise me. There was a restaurant here in Dallas until just a couple of years ago, and I don't know what happened to it, but it was called Smoke, and everything was smoked.
Yes,
the barbecue was smoked. The restaurant itself was smoked. You walked in, there was smoke, and they did everything, and probably including ice cream. Now, let me ask you about this. What about hardware? What kind of grills and such are we looking at for the best product?
well, if you're a newcomer to the field, I would go with something like a Weber kettle grill, 22.5-inch kettle. It's incredibly versatile. You can direct grill, indirect grill, smoke, spit, roast, grill in the embers. It's inexpensive. You're in for under $150. If you want a gas grill, gas grills are good for direct and indirect grilling. They're not particularly good for smoking, but many companies make gas grills in all different varieties. A lot of people like Kamado style cookers, like the Big Green Egg. Pellet grills are growing, obviously gaining in.
I was going to ask you about pellet grills.
Yeah,
you get good results there that you can from charcoal chunks and so forth.
You do. I don't think the smoke flavor is quite as pronounced as you might get from a stick burner, offset barrel smoker or a bullet smoker. But on the other hand, there's the convenience factor. Pretty much you set them and forget them. one thing to remember with a pellet grill is the lower the temperature you cook at, the more you smoke you get. You know, if you getting up to 350 and 400 degrees, which is good for roasting, you really won't get much of a smoke flavor.
That's interesting. Didn't realize that.
Yep.
Fuel. Let's talk for just a moment about wood types, charcoals, briquettes versus charcoals, and various wood types.
Well, I'm a natural lump charcoal guy. You know, a briquette is a composite mixture that commonly contains coal dust, petroleum binders, borax, ground up wood, ground up coal.
Yeah.
You know, to me, it's not as pure as just lump charcoal, which is basically just wood that's partially charred. That being said, though, I mean, you should know that all the big barbecue festivals, Memphis in May, Kansas City Royal, all those contestants use briquettes. So the whole key to a briquette is just to make sure it's completely lit through and ashed over. At first ignition process, it does put off some pretty nasty, nasty flavors. But, you know, if you can use natural lump charcoal, I like it.
But
wood, want to be
but
smoking.
Let me interject. Maybe this is the only thing I can interject here. But if you're talking about nasty flavors or smells or something, boy, oh boy, you got to stay away from that matchless charcoal, right? That's self-starting stuff.
You know, I don't like to throw bricks at anybody. And I think
Right.
even with that stuff, probably once it's lit completely, that is coals glowing orange and lightly ashed over, you know, a lot of those fumes and chemicals burn off. So
Okay.
anyway, you know, I'm not going to prescribe what you should use, but if you want to know what I use natural lump charcoal. Now, in terms of woods for smoking, natural hardwoods, you know, I think oak is the most versatile and certainly the most widely used around the world. Apple, cherry, alder, you know, kind of a lot of hot air gets discharged about which wood is superior. And when I was writing Project Smoke, we experimented and we kind of smoked the same food over different woods. And we found that with the exception of mesquite, there was really very little difference in the final flavor.
Really?
Mesquite, yeah, because mesquite kind of has a very strong, oily sort of flavor, you know, that goes great with beef. But you know, I think what matters, the wood you use matters less than the way you dose the smoke, and that is you should just dose a steady stream for a long time. We guys have a tendency to sort of think, well, gee, if you're going to use, you know, 5 pounds over 2 hours, let's just shorten the process and use all 5 pounds the first 10 minutes, and then we can, and that doesn't work, as you know.
Or over season the smoke as you would anything else. Yeah, well, but I always thought that the fruit woods were sweeter than hickory and such.
Yeah, I'm not, you know, I'm not sure that once you burn them, that really is the case. However, don't forget there's, you know, there's an awful lot of romance in barbecue, and the number of beers or bourbon you drink in any particular grill or smoke session certainly contributes. So I'm sure after a few beers or a few shots of bourbon, you know, you can absolutely detect the apple flavor in applewood smoke and the the hickory flavor in hickory smoke.
All right, talk to me about spices and rubs and sauces.
Yeah.
It's hard to learn about that stuff, except for, you know, your own personal preference. But again, learning about what your personal preference are, it takes a lot of work. Yeah.
Right. Well, first of all, by the way, just to go back to woods for a moment.
Oh yeah.
I should mention that I do have a line of woods. They're currently branded under the Barbecue Essentials brand, but soon to be switching to the Planet Barbecue brand, which is the name of my line of prepared barbecue that we can talk about in a minute. But at any rate, we source our woods from Europe, and I think they have a really clean, beautiful, elegant flavor. So just wanted to throw that out there. In terms of seasonings, you know, salt and pepper to start with, and the salt, I like a coarse sea salt. Why sea salt? Because it contains a lot of trace minerals that I think just give you a better flavor. Why coarse? Because I like those crunchy crystals of salt. I like to bite into those when I'm eating meat.
Yeah.
Pepper, always freshly ground. And what we do on the set of Project Fire or Project Smoke is we grind, a cup of peppercorns in a spice mill, a coffee grinder. And then I pinch, because, when you're cooking, who wants to reach for the peppercorn grinder? But there's a huge difference with freshly ground black pepper from canned pre-ground black pepper. Barbecue rubs, I'll tell you what, I'll give you the proprietary secret to one of my barbecue rubs. It's equal parts salt, pepper, paprika, and brown sugar. That's the basic barbecue rub. Great on any kind of, pretty much anything. Then you can customize it. Instead of paprika, you can use chili powder. Instead of pepper, you can use lemon pepper or white pepper. Instead of regular sugar, you can use brown sugar. You can make a wet rub by using honey or molasses. You can add aromatics like garlic powder, onion powder, add heat with cayenne pepper. But that basic formula really should give you a couple of years of grilling.
Certainly a lot to think about and try out. How about sauces? The
Well,
stuff we should be doing ourselves, or
Yeah, well, I wrote a book once called Barbecue Sauces, Rubs, and Marinades. It was issued a long time ago and then reissued about 5 or 6 years ago. I completely updated it. Barbecue sauce, first of all, the sauce is no substitute for great barbecue.
right?
Meaning that if you don't get your meat right and your smoke toast right, it's not real barbecue. But a good sauce, it's like, it's like the accessories or the jewelry or it's a perfect complement to barbecue. And sauces really have a very strong regional influence. So, for example, in Kansas City, you have a tomato-based sauce that's very smoky, kind of epitomized by Kansas City Masterpiece barbecue sauce. And in Georgia, it's a mustard-based sauce. In the Carolina, the sauce is less a sauce and more just a liquid consisting of salt, vinegar, hot pepper flakes, and sometimes they add a little sugar to it. In the western part of the state, they'll wave a bottle of ketchup over it. But that goes great with pulled pork, right? Because if you put a thick sauce on shredded meat, it's just going to become kind of gloppy. But if you put a thin vinegar sauce on, it will absorb, but you'll still have the kind of nice meaty texture and chew. And then as you go around the world, barbecue sauces change again. So in Argentina, the classic sauce is chimichurri, which is a garlic, parsley, vinegar, and olive oil sauce. Or if you go to Indonesia or Thailand, the barbecue sauce is a peanut-based barbecue sauce that goes great with those little kebabs known as satays.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, to me, it's a very fascinating process. And once again, I'm always thinking geography. I'm always thinking travel. I'm always thinking how the barbecue of a particular place reflects the culture, reflects the local economy, what grows there, what kind of food people serve there.
I'm wondering if that is changing. Do you find that maybe it's all becoming gradually a little bit more homogenized? The reason I think that is because of you start talking about regions of the United States. It makes me think about dialogue, dialects and accents. And here I am in Texas, and it's very hard to find a standard Texas accent near or in the big cities. If you get out in the countryside, you'll hear that kind of thing. But it's becoming so homogenized. People are traveling so much more and bringing their own cultural influences. Is that a fact with flavorings?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So when I started writing about barbecue, and actually Barbecue Bible is about to celebrate its 25th anniversary next year. Talk about an amazing and scary thought. But you really didn't see pulled pork outside of the Carolinas.
Right.
And you really didn't see much brisket outside of Texas. Well, today, barbecue joints anywhere in the United States, not to mention in Germany, in Bangkok, you find brisket and pulled pork. So there, I call it the Starbucksification of barbecue. and homogenization is the word.
Yeah.
However, I at the same time, I do believe that barbecue is some of the last truly regional food. And there are, just because you have pulled pork in Los Angeles doesn't mean that it's going to taste the same as the pulled pork you might have in the Carolinas.
When we lived in California, we discovered tri-tip.
Tri-tip, sure.
Yeah, coming out of the Santa Cruz area. We moved to Texas, and I couldn't find a tri-tip to save my life. I finally found one at a kind of an upgrade butcher shop, and now it's in every supermarket.
Yeah. So this is what we do in America. We take a food, and when we like it, we spread it all over and homogenize it and mass market it. It's funny, I was reflecting on Barbecue Bible, when I wrote it when it came out 25 years ago. Ingredients like coconut milk you couldn't find, fish sauce you couldn't find, lemongrass you couldn't. So I had to come up with workarounds for all those ingredients. And of course, now today you go to your local supermarket, you can. But that's a good thing. It's a wonderful thing that we've really brought the world to our kitchens and our grills. And it's a wonderful
I have a piece of flat iron steak I'm going to do tonight just because it's so easy and can't mess it up, and it's Friday. Why has everything gotten so spicy hot lately? I mean, lately, within the last few years, I've gotten to a point. My wife and I are both of the mind. It's like, you know what? Heat is not a flavor. Pain is not a flavor. And we've gotten to a point where everybody is putting sriracha and stuff on everything, and it drives us a little bit crazy.
Well, I think it's America's kind of penchant for excess, and the power of one-upmanship. Once you start looking at a hot sauce as a power play and not as a common seasoning, it's a mile higher than yours. But I would argue that when handled judiciously, there are many different flavors between the initial blast of heat. And something like a chipotle chili has a smoke flavor. Something like a Scotch bonnet chili has there's a sort of floral apricot notes behind the heat. Sriracha, obviously, it's what happens when you take a chili and you ferment it with salt, and it has those kind of rich, almost cheesy, the same kind of umami flavors you find in cheese, not to mention nice garlic flavor. But, a sauce just to be painfully hot for the sake of being painfully hot, with ghost peppers or scorpion peppers. Yeah, been there, done that, don't need to do it again.
I would imagine that would drive the Francophile in you crazy a little bit.
Yeah, that piece, they're not really so into hot and spicy in France yet.
What else is going on around the world that we haven't discovered yet that's really, really wonderful? Is there such a thing?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, just kind of thinking about my travels in Colombia. They have this wonderful dish called lomo al trapo, which I made on the Project Fire TV show last year. And you take a beef tenderloin. Now, filet mignon doesn't really have much flavor. It's very tender, which is why people like it. But for this, you take a cloth. I soak it in red wine, mound salt on it, pose the beef tenderloin on the salt, wrap the whole shebang up, and then you toss it on the embers of the fire. You cook it for 8 minutes on one side, 9 minutes on the other. It kind of cooks down to a hard shell that you crack with a knife. And when you open it up, you get the most spectacularly flavorful beef tenderloin you could ever imagine. So that's a pretty cool dish. Thinking about Germany, they've got something called Schwenkbraten. A schwenker is a grill that's it's hung from a tripod, and it swings. So you cook a pork chop, or you might cook pork is that's their essential meat. And you put it on this grill and you wind it up, and it kind of sort of spins around and swings back and forth. And it's a great way to wind up with an even heat from a mercurial source like a wood fire. Wood fires are not one reason people switch from wood fires to charcoals. Charcoals are more predictable heat, and it's more even heat. I love grilling over wood myself because I love that the smoke flavor you get from it. But talk about hot spots and not so hot spots.
Yeah. I'm a little nervous doing fish, anything that
Mhm.
comes out of the water, putting it on a hot grill. What's the basic involved there, so that you're not ruining it or burning it or whatever.
Well, you need to pick the right fish for the right fire. So I'm speaking to you from Martha's Vineyard, and we have absolutely terrific swordfish. Now that's a firm flesh steak fish.
Yeah.
So that you can just put on the grill like you would on a steak. It holds together. It's fun. However, if you were cooking a whole fish, like let's say you got a whole snapper, like I would get when I'm down at my home in Miami, well, that's a very soft fish and very prone to sticking on the grill grate. So for that, you either indirect grill it whole, or you put it in a fish basket, or you use a plancha. And the plancha is something I've been using a lot more lately. It's just basically a fancy name for a cast iron griddle that you put on your fire. And it enables you to cook fragile foods or small foods or even foods you normally wouldn't grill, like eggs. But you can add woods to your coals, so you're smoking, you're getting smoke flavor. Uh, and that's the key to fish, really, to pick the right method for the particular kind of fish.
All right. Finally, and I think this is the last thing I'm thinking of at the top of my head. And if you have anything else you want to add about anything, please do. But I'm fascinated by grilling vegetables, but not just putting them a little oil and throwing them on the grill. What can we do that we should try out that would be really a nice side accompaniment to a good piece of meat, no matter what kind we're talking about.
Well, that brings me to my most recent book, which is called How to Grill Vegetables. And I spent a lot of attention. I love grilled vegetables. And the book is divided up in kind of a funny way. You might expect me to divide it up by vegetables. It's actually divided up by sort of appetizery vegetables, first course vegetables, main course vegetables, side dish vegetables. And here too, just like fish, the key is picking the right fire for the right vegetable. A high moisture vegetable like mushrooms or bell peppers, tomatoes or zucchini or asparagus requires a hot heat and direct grilling, whereas a very firm, dense vegetable like a cauliflower or potato requires either indirect grilling or charring in the embers or spit roasting. You can spit roast. One of my favorite things to do, in the fall, you get whole Brussels sprout stalks, which they have maybe 60 or 70 Brussels sprouts on them. I love to put those on a rotisserie and roast the whole thing, and then carve the individual Brussels sprouts off at the table.
Oh, that's cool.
I like that. Yeah. But in a funny way, if you think about it, I mean, a steak sort of tastes like a steak, maybe a little bit more flavorful if it's a tri-tip or a belly steak, maybe a little more tender if it's a tenderloin or New York strip. But if you think about the vegetable kingdom, on the other hand, I mean, it's just the variety of flavors, the range of flavors and textures is absolutely enormous. So you will find me always grilling a lot of vegetables.
All right. I don't have the time, and you don't have the patience to have me list all of your books, all of your TV shows. Maybe you could talk for just a little bit for a moment about your barbecue university. That you still doing that in Colorado?
No, actually, we moved the school to South Carolina for 3 years. Now we're going to move to a new location. I don't know where. It just gets too darn hot in the summer to grill. Well, at least to run a barbecue university in South Carolina. It was last session we did was 98 degrees, and that was before you were in the shade. But for the TV shows, so I'm on public television. The current show is Project Fire, of which we did 4 seasons. The previous show is Project Smoke, all of which are on the air, or you can access them through StephenReichlen.com. My website is barbecuebible.com. That's BARBECUBIBLE.com. Tell you about my newest venture that's kind of fun. I've launched a company called Planet Barbecue, and we do frozen, ready to heat and eat barbecue, like brisket, ribs. We have a Texas style brisket, Kansas City style ribs, a double smoked brisket sausage. I just got, we just came out with a brand new product, which is a pastrami bacon. Now, pastrami and
Ooh.
bacon, two of my favorite cured smoked foods.
Yeah.
I had the idea to put them together to cure bacon with pastrami spices and then crust it with pastrami spices and smoke it.
That sounds
And
fabulous.
those are available through a company called Crowd Cow, CROWD, Crowd,
Yeah.
like crowd sharing, cow like a steer.
Okay.
And that's under the Planet Barbecue brand. But for so many years, I mean, people in a sense, they've sort of looked into my world whether watching me on TV or reading about it in my books or using my seasonings, not really tasting my food. And this was I wanted to do kind of as I wanted to give people an opportunity to taste my food the way they would if they came to my house. So
Where can we find it?
so go to planetbarbecue.com or go to crowdcow.com, again, CROWD, and follow the heating instructions. You can heat it on your grill, you can reheat it on your in the oven, and you'll taste what Stephen Reichlin is eating for dinner.
Wow. It's amazing. I wouldn't think that something like that, but I mean, it's got to be fresh, right? It's got to be right off the grill, but we can do that. Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. I have really enjoyed this opportunity, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to pull out Barbecue USA to lay down with when I take my nap, and then I'm going to have the Barbecue Bible take out in the backyard while I'm doing that flat iron today. Thanks,
Okay.
Stephen. It was nice
Thank
talking.
you. Go on.
Bye.